Ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people, welcome to the 97 Republic YouTube channel, where I react to news and live events of different sports. So I kindly ask that you hit the like button and the subscribe button, as that will really help this channel grow. And to ensure you don't skip a beat, click the notification bell as well. That way you can guarantee that you don't miss any of the action. Alright, so let's go. Before I start with today's video, I just want to take this time to personally thank every single viewer, every single subscriber, every like that I get. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your support, allowing me to do what I love, to do what I enjoy doing. And obviously goes without saying that without you, none of this is possible. And would be insane in the future that I would have a discourse with any one of you surrounding whatever topic, because I like to see different perspectives. I like to hear different opinions. I'm constantly hearing my own opinion, 24/7, and I would like to hear others' opinions regarding whatever matter. But just want to take this time to personally thank every single one of you for your support. I really appreciate it. Now, with regards to today's video, in light of UFC Fight Night Cejudo versus Yadong taking place in Seattle, I basically will cover both fighters' respective UFC careers. Starting off with Henry Cejudo. Now, Henry has had 14 fights inside of the UFC, has managed to win 10 of them, lose 4 of them. And Henry Cejudo debuted all the way back in 2014, 6 years removed from being an Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. So, Henry makes his debut, fights a guy named Dustin Kimura in his debut, and ends up winning and beating Kimura in that fight. And after that fight, went on a 3-fight winning streak, extending his winning streak to 4 consecutive fights, warranting him a #1 contender spot to fight Demetrius Johnson, who at the time was the flyweight champion of the UFC. And keep in mind, probably a prime Demetrius Johnson as well. One of the best mixed martial artists we have ever seen inside the sport, irrespective of his weight. Honestly, one of the most complete fighters we have ever seen and probably will ever see in the sport. Basically flourishing wherever the fight took place, just absolutely incredible. Whether it was striking, whether it was wrestling, whether it was in the clinch, Demetrius Johnson is and was special. So Henry goes on to fight Demetrius Johnson, goes on to fight Mighty Mouse for the 125-pound championship of the UFC, and ends up losing via some nasty Muay Thai. And basically, Henry suffers his first loss in his professional mixed martial arts career. And then after the Demetrius Johnson fight, Henry went on to be a coach of the Ultimate Fighter. Now, if you are new and you don't know how it works, so basically 2 active fighters within the same division inside the UFC get selected to be coaches, and basically coaches usually guys that are in their division and wants to have a contract within the UFC. So basically it's one coach and his team, and they basically fight one another. And at the season finale, to see who gets the UFC contract, both coaches fight one another as well. So then at the end of 2016, we have Joseph Benavidez taking on Henry Cejudo, and Henry suffers his second professional loss in his mixed martial arts career, losing to Joseph Benavidez, who was also probably one of the best fighters inside the UFC ever to not win a UFC belt. But then after the loss against Benavidez, it is safe to say that Henry Cejudo's dominance and his reign started, where Henry basically then went on to not lose for 3.5 years, up until retirement. So after the Benavidez fight, Henry regroups, takes on a guy named Wilson Reyes, beats him, then takes on Sergio Pettis, beats him, and then is basically warranted another championship fight, a #1 contender spot to fight and rematch Demetrius Johnson once again. And this time, learning from his past, Henry goes on to beat Mighty Mouse via split decision, being crowned the new flyweight champion of the UFC. And after beating Demetrius Johnson, Henry then went on to defend his flyweight championship against TJ Dillashaw. Now, let me set the scene for you. So, at the time, TJ was the current Bantamweight champion within the UFC. and basically wanted to go down to 125, beat the champion at 125 to become one of the very few double champs we have seen inside of the sport. Now, full transparency, I do not think that if Demetrius Johnson ended up beating Henry Cejudo again, that TJ Dillashaw would have gone down to 125 to fight DJ. I don't think TJ Dillashaw saw that he could actually beat Demetrius Johnson, and after Demetrius Johnson losing to Henry Cejudo, TJ Dillashaw decided he wanted to go down and maybe become double champion. And we saw in that fight that TJ Dillashaw basically got his doors blasted off by Henry Cejudo within the first round. Cejudo basically TKO'd TJ Dillashaw, and it was one of the 5 quickest at the time, one of the 5 quickest knockouts or stoppage victories we have ever seen inside of a title fight. Basically just a testament to how good Henry Cejudo had become. And then after that, what happened to transpire within the Bantamweight division is TJ Dillashaw had to vacate his championship due to the fact that he failed a drug test. So at the time, the Bantamweight championship was vacant. And then obviously Henry saw the perfect opportunity to become a double champion and to basically do what TJ Dillashaw tried to accomplish, but actually accomplish it. So Henry then went up to Bantamweight, went up to 135 and fought Marlon Moraes for the vacant Bantamweight championship of the world. And in the third round, ended up beating Marlon Moraes by a ground and pound, by a referee stoppage, and basically became the 4th double champion within the UFC with regards to being a simultaneous champion. So obviously we saw Conor do it, then we saw DC do it, then we saw Amanda Nunes do it, and now we saw Henry Cejudo do it. And that's basically where Triple C was born. Seeing that winning that championship, winning the Bantamweight championship for Henry Cejudo, solidified him, I think unanimously, as being the most decorated combat athlete of all time. Seeing that Henry won an Olympic gold medal, obviously that's 1C. Then we saw Henry win the flyweight championship of the UFC, that's the 2nd C. And then basically saw Henry be the Bantamweight champion of the UFC, making it the 3rd C, Triple C, and that's basically what it stands for. And being the most decorated combat athlete of all time. Up until, I'd probably say, that title is in jeopardy itself. And I think Alex Pereira might have a claim for that title. And if you want to watch the short I made, you can basically find it there. You could find it there. So after becoming Triple C and after becoming a double champion within the UFC, Henry then went on to defend his Bantamweight champion for the very first time in 2020 against one of the best bantamweights we have ever seen inside of the sport in Dominic Cruz, who was a champion at WEC, who was a champion at the UFC. Honestly, pound for pound, probably one of the best fighters to ever live. Right? I definitely would say, right, top 15, right? So Henry defends his belt against Dominic Cruz and ends up winning via TKO and ends up defending his belt successfully for the very first time inside of the bantamweight division, defeating Dominic Cruz. Now at this time, that's basically where the problem started to arise, especially with regards to Henry Cejudo, feeling like he deserves more money due to the fact that obviously he's the most decorated combat athlete of all time, and it felt like it was unanimous, and said that he felt like he deserved heavyweight money, seeing that obviously heavyweights make not much more money. If you look at what Stipe made at the time, even if we look at the other weight classes, if we look at John Jones at the time, who was light heavyweight, they made a lot of money, and obviously the smaller guys tended to not make as much. So Henry felt like he deserved more, ended up not getting the contract that he felt he deserved, so basically retired from the sport. And little to our knowledge, we would see Henry return 3 years later to face the current bantamweight champion at the time, who was Aljamain Sterling. Then we saw Henry lose via split decision, and we felt like Henry would probably retire. But then, to all of our surprise, he went on to fight Aljo's best friend in Merab Dvalishvili ended up losing that fight as well, and thought that would definitely be it. But to our surprise, once again, a year removed from Henry Cejudo versus Merab Dvalishvili, Henry is set to fight Song Yadong this weekend at UFC Fight Night, Cejudo versus Yadong in Seattle. And that's basically the journey of Triple C, of Henry Cejudo, with regards to his career within the UFC. Now looking at Song Yadong and his journey, his career within the UFC. So Song basically debuted in 2017, and Song Yadong has also had 14 fights within the UFC, and this is where there's some similarities show themselves with regards to Song's UFC career and Henry Cejudo's UFC career. So Song has also had 14 fights within the UFC. So Song has managed to fight and make his debut 3 years after Henry Cejudo. But then obviously seeing Henry Cejudo being retired for 3 years, they have the same amount of fights within the UFC. They have the same amount of wins within the UFC. Both men having 10 wins inside of the UFC. And then obviously Song Yadong has lost 3 fights and actually ended up drawing 1 fight. A draw that I felt was somewhat questionable. I think Song Yadong was exceptionally lucky to be handed that draw. But anyway, so Song makes his debut in 2017 and fights a guy named Bharat Kandari. And in Song Yadong's UFC debut, ended up finishing it, submitting Bharat Kandari via guillotine choke. And after his debut, went on to win another 3 consecutive fights, starting his UFC career 4-0. The exact same record that Henry Cejudo ended up starting his UFC career all the way back in 2014. But then obviously in Henry's 5th fight, we saw him fight Demetrius Johnson, where in Song Yadong's 5th fight, he ended up fighting Cody Stamann, who at the time was a formidable bantamweight with really good wrestling, a really good chin, but not comparable to obviously one of the best we've ever seen inside of the sport. And as I previously mentioned, I felt like Song Yadong was extremely fortunate to actually get a result out of that Cody Stamann fight, because it felt like, personally, it felt like Song ended up losing that fight. But then afterwards, fought Marlon Vera, fought Chito Vera, and ended up beating Chito via unanimous decision. But since then, it has felt extremely up and down regarding Song Yadong's UFC career, seeing that as soon as he manages to somewhat climb the mountain, before he gets to the peak, he slides off. And then that process repeats itself sometimes within the near future, because after the Marlon Vera fight, Song Yadong ends up losing to Kyler Phillips. And after losing to Kyler Phillips, Song Yadong then went on a 3-fight winning streak, beating the likes of Casey Kenny, who is a good bantamweight, and ended up knocking out Marlon Moraes as well. Now, this is not the same Marlon Moraes we saw fighting Henry Cejudo. Not the same guy. Even though Marlon was good when he fought Song Yadong, Marlon was top 5 perennially when he fought Henry Cejudo, and was one of the biggest bantamweights you would probably ever see inside of the sport. A massive figure, looked like the UFC Saitama. And Song Yadong ended up knocking out Marlon Moraes. But then afterwards, got dished out some of his own punishment. And then after the Corey Sandhagen fight, we saw him climb the mountain once again. We saw him beat Ricky Simon, Chris Gutierrez, and then after that, we saw him slip once again, where in his last fight, he fought Petr Yan. Now sure, Petr Yan basically being one of the best bantamweights I have ever seen, especially with regards to striking. The guy's boxing is as crisp as it gets, has incredible head movement, has exceptional timing, has great kicks, just an absolutely devastating figure, especially inside of the bantamweight division, where the only time we've really seen Petr Yan lose is when he fought wrestlers, and even when he fought wrestlers, even when he fought Aljo, even when he fought Merab, was somewhat competitive. Just an absolute phenom. And seeing that the guy comes from Siberia, one of the safest places in the world, because no one lives there, no criminal would dare live there, if you know what I mean. So don't feel like it's any blemish on Song Yadong's career, losing against a guy like Petr Yan. But once again, we saw Song slip someone. But now, usually what tends to happen is Song Yadong bounces back. And in light of UFC Fight Night, Cejudo versus Yadong would be incredibly interesting to see how Song Yadong approaches this fight. And it's going to be a good fight. Really looking forward to this bantamweight clash. And let me know in the comment section whose journey impressed you the most. Do you think Henry Cejudo is the most decorated combat athlete of all time? Are you looking forward to this fight? And let me know in the comment section as well, who do you think is going to win this matchup? What is your prediction regarding Henry Cejudo versus Song Yadong? Enjoy the rest of your day.